go.
Good morning. This is a meeting of the Wilmette Building Code Board of Appeals. Ms. Roberts, would you mind calling the roll?
Mr. James. Oh, got to unmute yourself.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Nescabel.
Here.
Mr. Vanacek.
Here.
Chairman Liederbach.
Here. Okay, so this meeting is being conducted remotely via Microsoft Teams. For those watching this video in the future, the state of Illinois is currently under a stay-at-home order issued by Governor J.B. Pritzker due to the coronavirus global pandemic. As a result, all in-person governmental meetings have been canceled. However, the Open Meetings Act now permits electronic meetings of governmental bodies like the Building Code Board of Appeals, and today we will be conducting our business in compliance with this state law. This meeting is being broadcast on the internet on YouTube Live, and the URL for that is www.youtube.com/user/village-of-Wilmette/live. To participate in this meeting, you can join through Microsoft Teams, visit the village's website at www.wilmette.com and find the calendar event for the Building Code Board of Appeals meeting. There's a link for you to join the meeting. You also find a meeting agenda and the case reports under the calendar. Alternatively, you can view the meeting on channel 6 or on YouTube and call in to the meeting, allowing you to listen and speak using your telephone. The phone number is 872-239-8225, and tonight's meeting code is 418-633-559, and you hit pound. You may also submit your comments through YouTube Live. A member of the village staff will read your comments to the Building Code Board of Appeals. All comments to the Board of Appeals will be recorded in the meeting minutes, as we typically do. For our guests joining by Teams, when you are not speaking, please keep your device muted to minimize the disruption of the proceedings, and your video turned off so that the board members may be seen. The first order of business is the approval of the February 28th, 2019 meeting minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved.
Let's see, the only case agenda is case number 2021/BCBA/01.
Chairman Liederbach, if we could call the roll on the minutes, the vote on the minutes?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
May we, so Mike?
Hang on. Mr. James, I'm voting on the minutes.
Approved.
Mr. Nescabel.
Approve.
Mr. Vanacek. And Chairman Liederbach.
Approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the only case on the agenda is case number 2021-BC-BA-02-1002 Linden. And then the applicants will present the case. Is that my understanding?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm Andrea Bergeron, and this is my husband, Kyle McMillan. We are the applicants. We live at 1002 Linden Avenue. We are seeking relief on some codes that our architect will explain for a basement remodel. When we purchased the house, we're newcomers to Wilmette. We'd like to be long-term. We purchased the house in February of this year, and with the intention of making the basement safer and more livable. It's currently unfinished, and the bathroom down there, it looks like was done kind of on the fly by previous owners. I don't really know, but it's it's not really usable. So, Kyle, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I just want to say that we're very excited about moving up to Wilmette. We actually discovered this house last October on Halloween, and we came up here on kind of a Norman Rockwell afternoon, just as the kids were getting ready to do their trick-or-treating around the neighborhood. And we'd already been big fans of Wilmette, and we'd come to some of the restaurants, but that day sort of really sold us on Wilmette because it was such a bucolic kind of a day with the kids out here, as I say, trick-or-treating. And we just came across this house. It was one that our real estate agent hadn't even told us about, and we just fell in love with it immediately. And lucky enough for us, in this very, very tight real estate market, we were actually able to buy this house. And we are both people who have lived in condos pretty much, or apartments, our entire life. So having a house with our yard, which we've started to do gardening and that sort of thing, was really a dream come true for us. So we're really hoping to make this house as good as it could possibly be. So that's why we're trying to move ahead with this project. And we hired a firm that's been helping us with this. And the architect from that firm I think wants to do a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation to kind of explain what we hope to do.
Well, thank you. And I, from the board, we just welcome you to Wilmette. And I remember making the same decision back in 1995.
Oh, wow.
It was the same sort of bucolic, evening with I think it was cicadas actually, but perfect evening, and we were sold. So I think you'll find that it'd be a really great decision for you as well.
Yeah, we think so.
I mean, one of the things we love about this house is the historic nature of it too. That's another thing that kind of drew us in.
Absolutely.
So yeah. I don't know, Brian or Michael, if you want to take over.
Sure. Good morning. Michael Carney with Studio Carney Architecture. I've been working with Andrea and Kyle to kind of figure out a way that we could make the staircase work in conformance with all the current building codes. And as I'm sure we all know, working with a 100-year-old home presents a lot of interesting challenges. So if I might, I would like to share, I do have a quick presentation to just kind of graphically illustrate, where I feel our hardships are, and discuss what we'd like to propose to do, and then return it back to you guys for discussion. All right, so I believe everybody sees the cover here, so we'll go ahead and walk through. The residence is 2-story single-family home. It's 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom. As Andrea pointed out, there is a bathroom in the basement, which I'll show in just a moment. Currently,
Excuse me, Michael, is everybody seeing it? Okay, there we go. Sorry, I was not seeing it until just...
Okay, sorry. I'll start over. Existing 2-story single-family residence. It's 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and as Andrea pointed out, that 1 bath is located in the unfinished basement. And through research, we believe the house was built around 1916, and we are seeking relief for first, basement ceiling height. Second is the stairway would be the width, headroom, riser height, the landing, tread depth, as well as relief on a portion of the energy code about insulating an existing basement wall. So looking at the floor plan here, on the left is our basement, and then middle is first floor, right is second floor, and highlighted in red is the staircase in question that we're looking to replace and reconstruct, at a minimum in like fashion, exactly how it is, just bringing it up to current construction standards and making it a little safer for use. So in starting with the existing basement, here's kind of just an overview image of the area that would be finished out in the basement. You can see the existing concrete floors in tough shape. So what we are proposing to do is, excuse me, we would install a thin coat to floor leveling compound to bring that up, and then do a luxury vinyl tile on it to keep that height to a minimum. So we've measured the space at just shy of 7 feet in its existing condition, and we believe, based on the leveling and the materials, that we would look to a finished ceiling of about 6'10". There is a centrally located beam, and taking the new floor into condition, the space under the beam would be approximately just shy of 6'3". So we are seeking relief on that. One of the things that we are going to do is we are going to remove as much of the abandoned pipework, wiring, and push all of that up into the floor cavity as best we can, opening up that space and making it usable. And then we would be painting the underside of the floor, so we would not be installing any finish on that ceiling, just to keep the maximum amount of clear height we can. This is the existing stair as it currently exists. As you can see, no guardrail on it. It's been pieced together. I don't believe it's original to the house, but I can't say exactly when it was constructed. But it has been tweaked and added onto throughout the years. So looking at it, in my review of the space, my survey, I noticed that the structural member that supports the wall above has actually started separating over time from a perpendicular structural member. So that is one of the reasons why I'm proposing that we'd like to get this stair out and reconstruct it. And it kind of ties into, we'll look at the width of the existing staircase. And as you note from the floor plans, this stair is pushed right up against the foundation wall. And it doesn't leave us a lot of flexibility to move it. So one of the things that we're looking for is the existing staircase at the point of that beam, which you can see here as well, that has a paneling over it on this side. That measured 2'6" within its current configuration. So what we what we're proposing to do is remove this beam and slide it over, so that one, we can assure that it's installed correctly, but two, we can free up a couple extra inches excuse me, to get us closer to the minimum of 36 inches. So here on the left is an updated view looking up the staircase, and you can see that this is that beam here with paneling over it. So we would be sliding that to the left, and based on my load calculations, I could replace that with 3 1.75" by 9.25" LVLs, sliding that over to get us a little bit extra room. The request for relief on the energy code also comes into play at just this location. So we adhere 1/4" gypboard on the concrete wall. Our finished rough width would be 2'8¾". If we were to bring it to the 2018 energy code requirements, that would reduce that width to right around 2'5½". We looked at a combination of doing closed cell spray insulation so that we can minimize the depth of the wall. But what we are looking for here is above the staircase to leave it as either exposed concrete or going with 1/4" drywall over it. Below the staircase, we would fur out the wall and insulate it to the current energy code requirements. And then all of the other exposed concrete walls would also be insulated to current code requirements. Moving along, we're looking at the headroom here. And there's this, what I've got highlighted here, and it probably doesn't view very well, so I've highlighted it further. This is the underside of the stair landing above, and this enters into this staircase here. And you can see a different angle of it below. On the right-hand side is that beam that we're going to be relocating. So in doing so, that allows us an opportunity to really do some exploratory demolition where we can remove all the finishes of the underside of the stair to see if there's anything that we can do to minimize this intrusion into the headroom. Of course, once we see what we have to work with in demoing all of that, we would certainly look, to see what requirements would be as far as the finished materials and closing off the underside of a staircase with the current or the required fire prevention requirements. And here is an image of the first floor staircase. The point that we're dealing with, it's the bottom of these stringers and that landing that are impeding in the headroom within that staircase. So here what I have, and I can, after this, I can go to an enlarged image of it if any of you require. But this is that area that is currently sticking out into the staircase. So as we look at it, even from the very top, the door is less than 6'8", which would be the required minimum clearance. And working our way down from the tread directly below is actually less than 6 foot. So what we're looking to do is reconstruct the stair, and I've come up with a variety of different solutions that try to get it as close as we can, but because of all the existing construction above, it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to meet the headroom requirements. So one of the scenarios that gets us closer is doing a code compliant tread, but in all cases, the risers have to be 8.5 inches instead of 7 3/4. So each one is 3/4 of an inch over code minimums or maximums rather. So we have solution A, which is the only difference between this and the existing conditions is that we work in a code compliant tread. It does reduce a little bit of that headroom on a diagonal, but it's the closest that we can get. And then the other solution is literally just replacing it in like kind, and keeping everything as it is, doing a 10-inch tread in lieu of the 11 or 10 plus 1 for the nosing. This would be a 10-inch total. And then again, an 8.5-inch riser. And the landing of the staircase down in either scenario, I can still, even with furring out the existing wall, we can still at the base of the stair be in conformance with 36 inches. The landing at the top of the stair is less than 36 inches, but it backs up to a finished kitchen and would require us. So we've got, I'll give you back to an overview. So the landing down here at the base of the stair will always be in conformance, even with furring out the wall for insulation purposes. But at the top of the stair, we have the finished kitchen, rear exit door, and then the top of the stair, which it would require us to pull out this kitchen in order to make that work. So it kind of really, again, looking at the floor plan, we've really been pushed into the bare minimums to work with. So we are seeking relief again on those items. And at that point, that concludes my part of the presentation to turn it over to you and answer any questions that any of you may have.
And I would ask if the board members are going to ask questions or speak, to please turn on your video when you do so.
One question that I have is, if we look at proposed solution A, and one were to drop a plumb bob from that little scooped out section that you included in your photograph to the plane of the stair leading to the basement, what would that dimension be? It looks like, it would be the 5'9" and 1/8 plus the 8.5 plus a little bit, because you have to measure, in perpendicular, in line with the lowest point. And I'm just
Correct.
curious as to what that dimension is.
I believe it was 5. If we were going straight down from there to that first step, it was I think 5'3", if I remember correctly.
Okay, so where code requires 6'8", you would be providing 5'3". Is that correct?
In that it was 5. Yes, it was 5'4". I apologize. Yes, in that diagonal approach. And go ahead. I apologize.
Oh, it's quite right. And just to make sure we're clear, we're talking about the proposed solution A as opposed to existing conditions.
Mm-hmm. When we do extend the staircase out due to the increased depth, we are losing 4 inches in that. So it was an opportunity to show it that yes, it is compressing it. We're trying. I mean, I'm 6'4", and I'm a big guy. And when I first went down there, you have to do that the jog, and I do have a larger foot, so I do appreciate larger treads. But this is an opportunity to get a larger tread. Trying to find a solution that would work. So it was this. And I think we've looked at it as it gets us the foot room, stability for using the stairs. You're already having to duck, so a little bit more of pushing your head to the side. It is kind of what it is. We can't take the entire stair out. So finding a balance of a little bit more stable underfoot. And then solution B is just doing it as it is. And I'm not comfortable doing a, say, 9.25 inch riser so that I can pull that back. To me, that doesn't make sense. I think that makes it even more unsafe because we're not used to stepping those distances. So, it's trying to find something that meets as many boxes as we possibly can get.
And I appreciate your pain because this, I think, Mike and I and anyone in the building trades have experienced how complex this equation is, because it interacts with so many different aspects of the house. I always say the stair builder is or should be the smartest guy in the job. Parallel with that, it has to do with probably our most important, responsibility here, which is life safety. And so, there's where there's things that there's more latitude on. This one's, one we have to proceed very carefully on, because we have to think not only of Andy and Ryan, but also, if they're guests or if there's a fireman coming to service the house. I mean, and eventually what happens when the house changes hands.
Yep.
I just hope everyone appreciates that. So, the energy, the insulation, I think, is a situation where personally I feel we have more latitude, because you're improving in that the situation, and it doesn't have to do with safety. So But let me open it up to my fellow board members to hear their thoughts.
Mike, if you're talking, you need to change your mic or something. So while we're waiting for Mike to get on the phone, this Wilmette is a community with no, we're not hearing Mike. So Wilmette is a community with thousands of older homes. What is the city? What's the view of the village in the past when we come up with these kind of situations where we have 100-year-old homes with non-conforming? This isn't the first time. Does the building department has it dealt with these kind of issues in the past? And if so, can they give us guidance on how they've dealt with these in previous cases? Or are we starting everyone's a fresh case?
I could try to answer that. I mean, we see a lot of requests that have to do with zoning variation, typically, something that has to do with the setback or a height or floor area. To my knowledge, and Lisa could chime in, Scott hasn't been here that long. I think since Scott has been here as our building plan reviewer and our, basically our code expert, this is only the second Building Code Board of Appeals meeting we've had. So I don't recall seeing a request like this that dealt with older home trying to improve itself and needing a waiver, in particular from a staircase or for that basement height. Again, we see a lot of zoning variations that relate to historic homes, and typically, if ultimately it's not going to be harmful to or change the character of the neighborhood or harmful to the neighbors, those sorts of zoning variations are looked at positively. The giving leeway to allow a home to be improved, provided it's not going to pose a life safety or light and air sort of issue, depending on what type of request it would be. If it's a variation request, I think we've been inclined to consider it, but unfortunately we don't have that I know of much precedent on this type of request when you're dealing with the building code.
And one other comment I'm going to make is that as the house exists in its current condition, the owner is not obligated to make improvements to bring it up to code. The current buyers bought the building as is, and if they did nothing, they could continue to use what we all consider to be an unsafe staircase in a pretty basic basement. And in this case, we have a family that has, rather than just hire a handyman and put a handrail in and calling it a day, has actually gone to the trouble of hiring professionals to design things, bring it to village for approval. And in a sense, their petition is somewhat handicapped because we are trying to bring them to code in a very difficult situation. If we were to completely deny this, the owners could simply say, well, we'll keep the same unsafe staircase, and we have not improved the building stock of the village in that sense. And it puts us in a tough spot because we don't want to blanket start approving things because they're a bad situation. On the other hand, what they're proposing generally seems to be making the house more energy efficient, more useful, actually the staircase safer. From my own experience, I've looked at a lot of homes in Wilmette, but prior to coming here, I'm also 6'4", and I can remember ducking in staircases not only to the basement, but sometimes to the second floor pretty routinely. And I have that situation in my current home, and I'm not going to change it and I'm not going to come to the board for an appeal. But we do know that these exist in many homes. So just a general comment on how we view the unfortunate circumstances here.
Any other thoughts?
Mike, sorry, you may want to try calling in. Use the telephone number to get the audio.
Yeah, that was weird since it was working, 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Oh, we could hear you.
Got it? Excellent. Okay. Michael, going back to your diagram of the stairs where it shows 5'8", I brought in your drawing and I converted it into my file, and I did a parallel line along the nosings and along the ceiling at 6'8", and it looked like you had more headroom than 5'8". When you do the diagonals.
I typically have more than 5'8", but that I just picked that one point because that was where it was going to come into it. So
they do the diagonals, so it's really all along the diagonals, and the drawing I did cleared that.
Okay.
It looked like it anyway, but maybe I wasn't to scale. Thought it was, but a lot of times, when you do work on an existing home, the work has to be brought up to code. That's like insulation. That's easy. You just do the spray foam, or you upgrade your plumbing. In this case, it would be a lot more difficult. Not only are we talking risers and treads, we're not even addressing the width. So if we're going to bring it up to code, you have to do the width as well. So which means ripping out the stairs to the second floor, ripping out the stairs to the basement. That could impact the second floor bathroom. It definitely would impact the kitchen. It just snowballs. So this I think is a case where you say you have a situation. Which is
Oh, I got it. Never mind. Sorry. Found it.
Mike, we're having difficulty hearing you again, I think.
Oh, visual aids.
Yeah, so can you turn it this way?
Try it this way.
The other way, so we can see the other side.
Sorry.
Yeah, perfect. You can just set it here.
Mike, we can't hear you.
you can't hear me.
There we go. Did you be careful where your mic is on your computer? You seem to pull away from it.
Okay.
You breaking up?
Any better over here?
A little better over there.
Okay, maybe the mic's over this side of the iMac. That's pretty much all. I think the bottom line is you still have the life safety thing, and the stair still functions as it is. You're just making it, and I could support that. It's an existing older home.
Yeah, and thank you very much for your feedback. And that was the one thing that Kyle and Andrea we had originally is, when we first spoke, it was really just to reconstruct the stair as it is. But seeing that all of the current requirements for life safety, the difficulty of meeting them, and reaching out to the village and working, and hearing, the initial thoughts of, well, if we go in for a permit review, which Kyle and Andrea are very much wanting to do, do this the correct way, is go in. It made it tough because I can't even propose to reconstruct the stair as it is And I mean, we don't check any of the boxes. So, I mean, I appreciate all of your time to consider, and I'll stop talking and let you guys keep discussing. But I wanted to say thank you.
Just a couple of thoughts, and I'll preface it by it's not the role of the board to help try to solve architectural problems, but I think our nature, as neighbors, I think anything that I would offer would be just as a neighbor trying to help out. I'm guessing that you've explored just putting the drywall straight on the underside of the deck, right? So you're tight there. I don't know if there's a mechanism to grant relief on the width, because I think if I were to think about life safety, going down, you can make it down something that's narrower, if we in fact have that latitude. It's the headroom that's the thing that's I don't see a way around. The fellow that brought this stair over is my son Eric, who's 6'4" as well. And his senior year at Bowdoin, he was in an old house that had a opening to a stair that was too low, and he hit it with his head and had a concussion. So it's something that I'm just really sensitive to. I always was, but it sort of brought home that this isn't an academic, issue. It can be real. I was wondering if you'd explored at all the notion of doing some remodeling work where the opening, from the kitchen to the sunroom exists, and the notion of winders to get yourself down quicker, and then having to relocate the refrigerator in some fashion to access the porch. I mean, I'm coming at this without knowing the house and any of that, but it didn't seem like there were many options. But if one were to try to drop down sooner, you would have that clearance. And then the other thought, whether it has merit or not, I can't say, but does returning and following the path of the stair from the second floor offer any benefits?
So we did look at that, and that it's an interesting proposal that you bring up, because that's what I thought when I was standing in the kitchen. It's a newly remodeled kitchen. But again, it was like my first approach was, what if I dropped the floor there to give me, one extra riser, which probably would bring me pretty close on that headroom. Mm-hmm. The problem is then I would be asking for relief on a landing in front of a door, because we would have to lower the sunroom, or when you were to step off the sunroom deck, you would just have literally the thickness of the exterior wall. You would have to step up over, like you would in some garage service doors where they don't actually cut out the concrete to bring it down to the slab. So then I'm creating a tripping hazard there.
Right. I was actually thinking, and again, I'm totally sensitive to issues of cost and remodeling kitchens especially, but I was thinking the opening would have to go through, somewhere near the refrigerator, because I think you could only get the right rise and run by using winders and going straight out, or straight down, excuse me. So that was the only way I could figure out how to get to the sunroom. And so I'm sure, or I can imagine that not being palatable.
Yeah, and as Mike had mentioned, really the only way to make that stair truly work in every aspect of the code would be to rip out the first floor stair and then rework the ceiling above on the second floor. It just, even I could share pictures if any of you'd like to see it. I do have photos of the width of the finished stair to the second floor, and that too is narrow less than.
I'm
I think
assuming all stairs are non-conforming here.
Yeah, I would. I mean,
We're not talking about the one to the second floor because you're not going to remodel it, but it's non-conforming as well.
there are a few things that do not conform. Correct. Yes.
Built 100 years ago, they didn't build the same way we do today.
Yes.
The headroom seems to be, I mean, let me go back. If we're giving relief, it is, you don't know where to stop, but the relief on the width, one could argue, is less critical than the relief on the headroom, because the life safety is not, as Phil said about his son, you hit your head, you have a concussion, or more critically, you hurt yourself and tumble down the stairs, is a real important issue. But if you have a substandard width where you're at 28 inches instead of 36 inches, and you have proper handrail, you've constricted what you can carry up and down the stairs, or you certainly can't have two people go up and down the stairs at the same time. But it seems to me you're at a different hazard level than you are with the headroom. So to me, I'm less concerned about getting the width right as trying to improve the headroom. And when you say 5'4", that's not just, oh, I got a 6'2" and I need to be careful when I go down. That is, it changes the population that have to duck at 5'4" from, I don't know, 2% of us at 6'4" to, 60% of us at 5'4". That's, to me, that's a different degree of hazard. And so anything we can do to improve the headroom, I think, is the more critical element to me than working on the width.
I have a 98-year-old house, and one of the steps has only got a 5'8" clearance to the basement, the stairs to the basement. And I have to warn everybody who goes down those steps to watch their head. Everybody has to duck unless they're very short. So it's definitely a hazard.
Michael, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, this is Kyle. I'm a little confused when we're talking about the 5'6". I believe that's the height that's been thrown out. Where is that height? Because I'm not clear on where that is on the stairs, that height.
So where the projection of that upper stair comes down at the underside, so at the ceiling height,
yeah,
in the stair, it's measured to the step to the front of it. So there's a pinch point at that location.
Because I'm 6'1", and as far as I know, when I go down the stairs, I don't hardly do any ducking at all. So I'm not really sure where that measurement comes into play, because that just doesn't seem right to me.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm 5'10", and I'm running down there to do laundry all the time.
Okay.
So I'm not really clear. That doesn't sound right to me, that measurement.
Okay, I can certainly go back and relook at the dimensions that I have, but it is less than the 6'8".
Oh,
yeah. Nobody's disputing that,
that.
but I'm just wondering, the 5'6" it doesn't sound right at all. 5'4", yeah, none of that sounds right.
So, Michael, in what you're proposing, is that an improvement over the existing head condition, or is it pinching it a little more? And
I apologize. Go ahead.
Between solutions A and B, which one of them, if either, creates more of a pinch point than you currently have?
Solution A creates more of a pinch point because I've extended the depth of the tread to be code compliant with the tread. Condition B is literally just reconstructing the stair exactly as it is, just with current construction techniques, methods, proper fasteners.
Let's do that.
And if you construct it as it is, are you proposing any changes to the stair head condition to try and gain any height there or not?
What we would do is we would pull down all of the drywall that is currently at that location where it poses an issue, and see what we can do to reduce, maybe we could take some of the structural members, rather than doing conventional framing, do some form of engineered lumber so that we can reduce the size to just give us as much as we can. I didn't want to start knocking holes in ceilings that were already finished.
No, I understand. If you don't want to do it unless you have a sense that it benefits you in some way.
If I could chime in on that comment. So my expectation is that when we did demo that, it is plaster and lath. So there is potential to gain some room if there is plaster and lath on that point by either painting the member or using 1/4 inch drywall.
It's clear to me that there's nothing we can do to the stair as it currently exists to make it code compliant. What it seems to me the petitioners are trying to do is propose essentially a rebuild in the existing condition to improve the condition to as safe as possible. Putting a handrail on it, trying to improve the headroom condition, making the stair construction safer. And I guess to me the issue is that if we are if we deny the petitioners the ability to do that, their likely outcome is to leave the stair as it exists and or decide that the house is too much trouble, put it on the market, sell it, and leave it for the next occupant owner to deal with. Puts us in a tough spot, in my opinion.
Okay, right. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, Mike, you're back.
Oh, excellent. I'm on the phone. Michael, I just checked your drawing again, to scale, checked it, and I still see 6'4" at the lowest point. At that thing, not 5'8", and 6'4" is, I think, just fine. I mean, that would just be me. But
well, can you turn me on?
Does that help at all?
So if the 5'8" that I've got is actually taken from a riser above or tread above.
Oh yeah, see, you really can't. You've got to take the diagonal line.
And in that situation, yes, it is 6'4" to clear it.
Yeah, and that's how the code. It's 6'8" along those diagonal lines anywhere. So you're 6'4". That's pretty good. Just one other thing I'd like to throw in. I know the current code is 2006, requires 10 inches nosing to nosing and 7 3/4 rise. But the previous code was the 92 cable, which was 9 inches nosing to nosing and 8 1/4 riser. So that's just something, you're close to meeting what was there, but it's the headroom thing. But it's at 6'4", I just don't see an issue. I know it's a little tight, but like Paul was saying, we do have Paul was saying we have an existing home, and I think we have to try to work with you guys on this. That's just my feel.
I went and looked at the codes that have been issued subsequent to the 2006, just to see if there was any trajectory.
Right.
Things were getting more conservative, and in fact, as of 2012, which was when I was the last one that I looked at, it's been the same. One handicap that we have or hurdle that we have is that a precedent? Because I know that every architect wrestles with stairs and stair height and making things work. At least maybe I tend to wind things too tight, but I'm always up against it. So given that 90 or 80 to now 80% of the houses in Wilmette are turn of the last century, what happens when the next person says that I'd like to make it 6'3"?
Well, we would take a look at that. I think each case to case. Here, I see no way. I even looked at moving the refrigerator. And like you said, move that wall. Then you have to move the door, and that would help. If you move the fridge, you move that wall, which is non-bearing, but you'd have to move the door out to the sunroom. Things just keep snowballing, and that might be, if that might be the solution. But you'd hate to have them have to redo the kitchen.
Absolutely.
It seems like we hit a financial hardship here, and it might not be the case. We might not be setting a precedent, because this is a tough one. I don't know what you would do.
In the spirit of what John said earlier, where he said they get lots of zoning requests because of the pre-existing conditions. And he said the view of the zoning board, which I'm not a member of, but is to accommodate what seems to be reasonable given the existing conditions, the impact on the neighborhood. Are we creating a condition that establishes a precedent that people will take advantage of? I think in our case, subject to the view of the building department, the plan review, and the village itself, perhaps we should think of this in terms of, is what the petitioner requesting something that is detrimental to the village, to the neighbors, to the people that will come to the house, or does it represent an improvement to an existing condition, and that on a non-precedent basis, but I think going forward, we could use this to say, is this something that improves an unsafe condition or improves a condition that is impossible to remediate without extraordinary measures? I'm more typically used to doing commercial projects where you don't have to bring things up to code unless you increase it by particularly stairs, by 50% of the value of the building. In this case, one would argue they're not spending 50% of the value of the house. They're certainly in their right to leave the stair exactly as it is, and to do all the other improvements they've talked about, and just simply ignore the stair. And I don't know that any of us benefit, the homeowners or the future homeowners or the guests benefit by having them do what's entirely in their right.
Thank you. Yep, I agree.
I agree entirely, and this is a very difficult situation, but I think that there's a fundamental difference between what a zoning board is allowed to do and what our board is allowed to do, and that the zoning is considering sort of the environment and the ensemble and how one thing balances against the next. So if you have a historic home and you want to find a way to preserve it, and you want to increase the setback or allow a roof line to continue, for me, or exceed the FAR in order to add a family room, which then makes the historic home livable by today's standards. That's a calculus, that I can make easily. If it's approving a situation that doesn't meet the code, that then could affect the life and safety of a third party or the owner or anyone else, I'm just to be frank, I'm wholly uncomfortable with that, because I know of too many stair accidents. to actually approve something like that. And I think that, there always is a way to do something. It's financially super unattractive. But to me, it sets a precedent that would come back. Well, one, just on its own merits, it's logical to say let's approve something that's better, but how does one draw that line? Other than using the benchmark of the code. That's where I am. I actually live on Linden. I would, you couldn't have a more simple. And I have a house that was built in 21. So like with the height in the basement, I think that's something I have some workarounds on that. With the energy code, I think that's something that one could easily find an argument for for making that exception. Even the width, I think, subject to just having reassurance from the village attorney that we're not creating a liability for the village. That's something on a sort of common sense basis. I figure the firemen can get down there. And that doesn't seem like a safety issue, or it's one that could be addressed with an egress window that's not expensive. But I can't get around the headroom issue, especially with my son's years in college and my father falling down a set of stairs in an old house. I mean, beyond my professional experience.
If they were to, so this is by, Mike said, oh, he could accept 6'4". If they have 6'4" and they were to take the finish off and gain back 2 more inches, just say hypothetically, at one point, do we say it has to be 6'8" and that's it? You're off by 1/8 of an inch. We can't accept it, or is there a precedent where we could suggest they do some investigative work to see what the maximum they could get, and then to come back and say, all right, if you're at 6'6" or 6'7" or whatever it is, we could consider that. Certainly, when he said 5'4" or 5'6", we were all, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But is there any idea that we could accept something less than 6'8" that's only slightly below, or do they have to get to the 6'8", in your opinion, Phil?
I think it would require a second reading of the code to see what latitude the building officials are permitted. That'll be within the text of the IRC, or should be. And if not, one could call the IRC, which is a national organization, and they would know of similar conditions. If we don't, I think that that they might be able to give guidance on that. But I think it's a case where we have to rely heavily on what other people found to be safe. I mean, that's just regrettably. I mean, I would give some thought to the Winders solution, and seeing if there was some creative way to get to the porch, that you have a galley kitchen and you go out a little window and you can get to the porch that way, because porch construction is less expensive than interior construction. So that I think would be, at least worth looking at, because you might find that more convenient anyway to just pop out from the kitchen to the porch. But I think relying on what's written in the IRC in terms of what latitude one has, and I think in terms of precedent, we're probably not going to find it within the village's history, and that casting a broader net would be our best hope of finding guidance in that regard.
And who is that? Is that the responsibility of the petitioners or this committee or the village building review to look for that precedent if that's an option available to us?
I mean, I think that it would be something that could be done from the village end, because I think there's deeper resources. I know that there's a subscription to, and the village is a member of the IBC and IRC. So one of us could reach out to them, with that question. I'd be happy to do it. I'd be happy for someone else to do it.
We could do it, and I don't know if Scott knows the answer to your first question, but I do think that this relief is something that's permissible in the IRC. I don't think it's prohibited to request this sort of relief. Scott, if you know the answer and want to correct me if I'm wrong, we surely could reach out to the ICC and ask them about situations where people have asked for this sort of relief to see if they've got an opinion on it. We could do that if the board feels that would be helpful in your deliberation. I see Scott unmuted, so he might have something to add.
It's model codes are the model codes. They new construction and new construction only. In the IRC, they speak to new construction. DC, they do have existing building code standards, but we have yet to adopt them.
And Scott, you don't know how the existing building code or that code you just mentioned would treat this situation off the top of your head, do you?
Doesn't apply to residential homes, 1-2 family homes.
Got it. Okay.
And I do have to point out the administrative section right off. I mean, first page of the code book says additions, alterations, and repairs must comply to all the requirements of a new home. So.
Right. That's part of the relief they're also asking for.
Right. Okay.
So, I mean, one thing I will say is I commend you for bringing this up, period, because I think there's quite a bit that happens within the village that just happens.
Yeah.
Chairman Liederbach, I could answer the one. I know you mentioned asking our attorney about any village liability. I did talk to our village attorney. There would be no liability on the village's part. One of the things he did suggest, though, if the relief was granted and the Building Code Board of Appeals felt it appropriate, we could record something on the property that indicates that relief was granted and, for this portions of the code, so that somebody buying the house would understand that, there's a staircase that was granted relief and isn't meeting the at that time building code. So he suggested if that was a concern of the Building Code Board of Appeals, that's something we could do. But yeah, there's no concern of liability of the Building Code Board of Appeals or the village if we would grant this relief.
Yeah, I mean, this is a crude example, but what my concern is, the fireman comes, he's got his hat on, right? He can't see what's above him. There's smoke. He hits his head.
Yeah.
And I think what we're charged with first and foremost is life safety. And I personally am not comfortable approving something that per the code and virtually every other code in my office doesn't permit. I mean, I would love to be able to say otherwise, and I'm speaking for myself, not for the board. but it's something I wouldn't do personally, and I don't think, I just don't feel it's that we have the authority to essentially second guess, but to prove something that is basically described as unsafe by all of these codes.
Now, going back to the width, you're okay with the width, but not the headroom. So you're okay with one, but not the other. And the other question is, then why do we even have a building code of appeals? If we,
I think, well, I mean, I can't defend that, but I can speak to the first. I'm saying that I'd be sympathetic to the narrower width because I can think of precedents like access to attics where you're allowed something that's 20 inches wide. I can think of other instances of the code that that have something narrower and personal experience. I think ultimately we would want the IRC to opine on that because they're the experts. We're like, we're not code officials. But that would be something that I could imagine, being something that could be approved, once one did the due diligence. It's the headroom that I think is you could never say, you could say without question it's safer, and you could never say it's safe.
Phil, if we ask the architect and the contractor and the plaintiffs to do some investigative work in that stair and took off the decorative material and actually determined what the headroom, and they could come back and say, we can rebuild this and we can get 6'5" and 7/8, 6'6.5", whatever it is, would that, and it would be more than 5'9" or whatever they say or 6'1", whatever the existing condition is, would that change your opinion on this at all? And it would be fair for us to ask for that, or in your mind, anything less than 6'8" is not something that you can support?
I think that there's two sides to me. There's the professional side, and then there's the personal side.
Understand.
The professional side, would say that unless we had an interpretation from the people that wrote the code and guidance on how and when exceptions are made in this regard, I wouldn't be comfortable with it. Have I been in plenty of houses where 6'6" would be perfectly fine? And did Frank Lloyd Wright do a 6'2" door to his Charnley house with Louis Sullivan? I know all this stuff, right? But I think that this, is we have to adhere very closely to the text.
So could we go along a parallel path that we ask the folks at the Code for Compliance how they feel about allowing a slightly lower headroom, and then parallel to that, ask the homeowners to do a little bit of investigation to find out what the maximum height they can get. And maybe by doing that, we can get a convergence of better understanding the relief that I think we all feel as individuals we would like to give,
right,
and as professionals we're uncomfortable giving, if I could say it that way.
And I think if you were to, again, to use my little convenient visual aid, if you were to just drill down and put a small hole here, you'll be able to tell how close the lath and plaster is to this point. Hopefully you'll find it's down here, and not right here.
That's probably at least 2 inches. Not sure how much airspace there is, but.
I think, that I think is something that would be helpful.
I don't think we're in a position to come to any kind of vote today on something, but just to go over the relief they're asking for. My impression is we're sympathetic to the insulation along the stairwell. We're sympathetic to the headroom issue in the basement. Frankly, if they weren't asking for remodeling, most people would just go and put the vinyl tile down and not bother to talk to anybody. I don't think that requires a permit.
Right.
So I think we're sympathetic to that. We're sympathetic to the width issue because it's a very difficult situation. We are anticipating it will have code compliant handrail on the exposed side, which makes it safer. But the sticking point is headroom. So we could ask the petitioners and their design team to do a little more investigation and come back with a better definition of the height that is achievable. And in the meantime, we would ask the village to, or we would do a request to the code people to see if they have an opinion on providing this kind of relief for an addition. And then we would all go off and do our thing, and we would re-meet once we have more information available to us. Is that a fair statement of what is the next steps?
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable to me. Let's find out what our headroom actually is. That might solve everything.
To Michael and the homeowners, is asking you to do a little more investigative or something that you're willing to do?
I don't want to. I won't speak for Andrea and Kyle.
I understand.
Two things. One, I do also want to look back at the riser height being 8.5 inches in lieu of 7 3/4, because if we try to make that work, it makes the headroom even worse. I do agree that where my measurements were off, yes, in existing conditions, it is 6'4" of clearance in there. It works in our favor if we build the same way. If we increase the tread, it's going to take that off. But another thing, Mr. Liederbach, how you were illustrating about the underside of that stair. One of the things in this condition is that's actually the structural landing. That's the support for the landing upstairs. If I may, I'll quickly show my desktop again.
By the way, when I was referring to the headroom, I was thinking of your rebuilding in the same state because of the problems with increasing the tread width, reducing the height.
So in that condition, if we're looking at the PowerPoint, this is the enlarged area where we have the underside of the stringers on the side and the underside of that stair is finished. But when looking at the first floor stair going up, this is where I've kind of located. So it's supporting these stringers coming down onto this landing. So, you know, I definitely am fully supporting looking into, you know, pulling back the finishes and opening that up more so that we can fully explore and, you know, and give you guys an exact finished condition. But I will turn it over to Andrea and Kyle for their approval to tear apart their house.
I think I can just drill the little holes with the little camera that allows you to see things. There's a little snake camera that I've seen builders use. So I go easy on that. I do think when I look at that landing, that there's probably a structural component that runs north-south that there'd be a workaround on. So I would look closely at that. And then I just wouldn't rule out, it might be worth just exploring, the notion of.
You need to raise it a little higher,
Sorry.
Mike. There you go.
There you go, Phil.
So I'm really low tech. But either let's see, right hand, left hand. Either having this little open, trying to create an opening in the galley kitchen and some little add-on to the porch. Or the other question I had is, with that winder idea, if what's the relationship of the first floor of the house to that porch elevation? Is that porch at the same elevation of the first floor, or is it a step down?
I believe it was pretty much level with the first floor, maybe a little bit below.
It's slightly lower, just
it's
like
slightly-
maybe,
3-4 inches.
yeah.
Okay, but not enough to get you what you need. It's not a full step, which would then give you the 4+ inches. Yeah. Okay. That's just trying to come up with ideas.
I first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you for your very careful attention to all this and your careful thoughtfulness about this. And I think we would be willing to do some of the investigation that you're talking about to try to get, an extra inch or two that as has been discussed. I think that's something we would be open to.
If Brian and Mike are.
Yeah, if Brian and Michael are willing to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very reasonable to request that. I don't think it's very invasive, and if we can get actual final conditions, I think it'll benefit this whole conversation. So it's not just speculative.
I agree with Brian.
So John, from the board's perspective, and to keep this project going forward, do we want to kind of set a timeline and say we'll meet again in a couple of weeks, or however long we think it'll take each side to get additional information?
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think that there is, except for there's no notice that has to go in the paper, no notice that has to go to neighbors. So this is something, like 7 to 10 days before, if we know that the board is available, we could schedule that meeting. So we could do it on relatively short notice. The only thing is we will be meeting in person. So that might make it a little bit more difficult for some of you, to make a meeting, being in person. So after June 11th, we'll be going back to in-person meetings. So, and again, we don't necessarily need to, we could just indicate that we're continuing it. It's not like we have to continue it to a date certain. And, we will reach out to ICC. I don't know, if we're necessarily going to really get an answer for them, except as, them to say, yes, that, is a section of the code that relief is sometimes requested. Whether they'll be willing to give their opinion on this, I'm not sure.
We can only ask for what they'll give us, and they'll tell us what they tell us, and we'll have to react accordingly.
Yeah. I do think if that's what we're going to do, it would be good for us to know what the actual conditions are. If in fact they're going from, 6'4", but then they're going to get up to 6'4.5", making the headroom greater. If we're going to reach out to ICC, it's probably good for us to know, what's actually happening there. The other thing we'll do is reach out to the fire department. The fire chief actually is technically one of the staff liaisons to your board. We have a new fire chief. He just started about a month ago, and we could also ask for their opinion on it, because I as Chairman Liederbach said, they're probably the most likely person to go in there that doesn't have a relationship with the house somewhat, either knowing the owners. Going in an emergency is obviously something that hopefully won't happen, but we always want to make sure they're protected.
Maybe the firemen are like people in the submarine. They can't be over 5'8", so not a problem.
Yeah, put a little note.
Yeah. I will make myself available for whenever we have the next meeting. It may be, if we're meeting in person, they'll be like we've been in the past, an early evening or late afternoon, but
yeah,
I can make myself available. I think that the petitioners have done a very good job with their consultants, their contractor and architect, in trying to show that they're trying to improve their house and yet comply with the village requirements. And I think the board's done a pretty nice job of listening to all the issues and trying to come up with a way to accommodate. If we can get better information, perhaps be in a position the next time we meet to give final disposition on this.
Right.
Again, I want to thank all of you. I've got to run off to a doctor's appointment, which I could only set up for today and didn't have any choice. So I really appreciate your attention and your careful thoughtfulness to all this.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it probably wouldn't hurt just to have a motion and a second to just continue it to a future date, which we will pick, just so we have that on the record.
I move that we adjourn and reconvene at a later date to be determined.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks.
Yes.
I did want to, I guess, clarify what issues they may be relief on. I know we can't pre-approve any relief, but it sounds like we're sensitive to the width, but how about the treads, both the riser height and the tread? Because we obviously, those two directly affect the clearance, the headroom.
I think,
I don't want to go ahead.
I just think that based on what we've been told, the existing width and tread width and riser height are what give us the greatest headroom. And if we ask for compliance, particularly on the tread width, we will find ourselves with a lessened headroom. So I think that when we ask for the code group where we can get relief, of course we should include all these topics. But I think my impression from the group, and I don't want to speak for everyone, is that we are more concerned with the headroom is a greater life safety issue than a 1-inch change in the tread width. But
I would agree.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I think that, and this is speculation, but I think if we were to sort of rank the risk from lowest to highest, from my perspective, the width would be the lowest. Then the headroom to 6'6" or something like that, and then the tread height, the rise. The thing that I think is super important is to have a deep enough tread that your foot, if you're a little shaky, lands on it and not half on it. So, that would just be my off the cuff sort of thinking on it.
And it does a 10-inch tread width present a problem for you? Because that's, I think, what they said the existing one is.
He was adding the 1-inch nosing. So he was, in my interpretation, he was describing what's within the industry a 9-inch.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked at spiral stairs. I couldn't think of any other sort of outs. What might be a useful thing for them to do is to have someone like Lakeshore Stair or Stair Company come out, because maybe they have tricks that would help. And the only thing I can think of is somehow following more faithfully the underside of the stair from 1 to 2. And so anyway, that would just be another thought. It would mean they'd have to put a post down in that inside corner, but a lolly column is not a big cost.
All right. Unfortunately, I have a noon call I need to be on, so I'm going to have to leave as well. But thanks to everyone for their participation, and let me know what the next steps are.
Thank you, Paul.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Good to see everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, let me just really quickly, I'm going to call a vote on the, just to continue it. Mr. Vanderhorst? George? Sorry. Calling a vote on the, to basically continue the request. Sorry. Mr. Vanacek?
Yes. All
Mr.
in favor.
Nussbaum?
Yes.
Mr. James? Oh,
He's gone.
yeah. Mr. Vanderhorst?
Yes.
Chairman Liederbach?
Yes.
Okay, now we could do a motion to adjourn when you're ready in a second.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Yes.
Second.
Yes, second.
Okay. Mr. Vanderhorst?
Approved.
Mr. Vanacek?
Yes.
Mr. Nussbaum?
Yes.
Chairman Liederbach?
Approved. Yes.
Congratulations, you just had your first and only virtual remote meeting. Good news. Back in person.
Thank goodness.
I was really nervous.